Okay, it is 4:15. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Please rise and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice.
So we can all be heard. Roll call. Sam Martin? Here. Bob Freeman? And Rick Morgan's here. Keeping with our normal agenda, we have a opportunity now for public input. Anybody?
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
We'll have a second one at the end, but this allows people to have a chance to have the public input before we get into the day-to-day business that we normally do.
Sure.
Sure.
Josh Arnold, resident registered voter here in Ossipee, and came as a follow-up to the special town meeting that was held for the town beach vote to express that I feel was a disservice to the democratic process and participation. I was one of among many who were, arrived to hear the information that was shared before the vote, but was, stuck outside. The line stopped moving by the time I got here. That I arrived, and was just really frustrated. Nobody came out to explain what was going on. We could hear kind of clapping. We didn't know if the line was moving. If we couldn't come in and get an agenda. Weren't able to come in and make a motion, and so feel that it was just not adequate, not sufficient, to host the event that it was intended, what it was intended to do. And also, there were some people who I know came to participate in this way for the first time, and I watched them, leave. They came in, didn't know what was going on, were standing out in the cold for an hour, and left. I can guarantee some of them that came for the first time won't be back. And that's a shame when we're trying to get more people involved. And I was really excited when I showed up at first, see so many people, like, oh, this is so great, and then quickly realized that no, this is actually a real problem, and believe that someone should have stepped up to, either call the meeting off because they realized that we didn't have the capacity to host that, or made a motion to move the meeting maybe across the street or something should have been done. So that's why I'm here to express that.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'm going to share.
More people on the record, the better.
This is not a little bit later on our agenda, but while we're on the subject, we did receive correspondence. I'll read. First one, dear Ossipee Selectmen, I believe the process that unfolded at the special town meeting on Tuesday, November 28, 2017 was unfair, and that this unfair process affected the final vote count and threatens its validity. On November 28, 2017, I arrived at Town Hall to find a line outside the building that divided down the two ramps. I asked what was going on, and others in the line told me that the line was to enter the meeting and that it was moving slowly. I recognized many neighbors in the line and realized that there was a historic crowd that gathered to vote. One Ossipee resident in front of me expressed misgivings about the idea of buying the beach and said that he wanted more information in the meeting. The line eventually came to a stop. A friend came out of Town Hall and explained that the meeting was adjourned and voting would commence shortly. No one of authority explained what was going on or how the meeting would proceed. The people around me were uncomfortable and cold, and a number of them left. No one told us how long we would have to wait or check to see if there were any resident who needed special accommodations. I wonder how many arrived to see the line and immediately left. At some point, I was frustrated enough to force my way through the line to explain what was going on to someone. A neighbor seemed equally frustrated, and I followed him to the front of the gymnasium. On the way, Joseph Goss from the Budget Committee told us to address the moderator. We made our way to the front and ducked under the rope in order to find the moderator. We tried to explain the situation and how we thought the process was unfair. The moderator explained that we would all get to vote and walked away. An Ossipee policeman told me to step behind the rope and that they weren't going to change anything tonight, but the problem should have been addressed that evening. We may have not used the right language, but we were trying to address the unfair process that kept more than 100 registered Ossipee voters unable to enter the town meeting. It seems like a motion could have been made to address this problem in some way, and it is frustrating that no one seemed to want to address the problem. I believe this unfair process should have been addressed on the night of the special town meeting by either postponing or moving the vote to a location that could accommodate the registered Ossipee voters who arrived to take part. I urge the selectmen to reschedule the special town meeting in a location that can accommodate the crowd and review the events that unfolded on November 28th in order to prevent this unfair process from recurring. I am equally concerned about the validity of the town beach vote and future votes scheduled to take place at Town Hall. And that's from a Paul Swegel for Kilgrove. This is another one addressed to the town administrator. At the town meeting last night, many people were stuck outside, not able to hear what was being said. They waited outside for 2 hours to vote. Some people had to leave because they were cold and had kids. I feel the selectmen were not prepared for the amount of people who showed up, and because of that, the vote might have been different if it were held at a better location such as the school gym. Is it legal or possible to do a second vote? I suspect the property has already been sold, since I am sure they were prepared for this outcome. But if it hasn't, is there still a chance to make this difference? I think a lot of people would feel happier today. Joy Gagnon. Third one, it says, please include any questions or comments. I cannot attend the selectmen's meeting on Monday as I am employed and cannot take the time off, but I would like to petition the town to have a revote on the beach issue. I personally was not able to attend the hearing as the hall was full when I got there and was very disappointed, but still waited to vote as I was able to stand for more than the hour plus it required to actually get to place my vote. I personally witnessed other residents around me leave because they could not stand on their feet any longer, and heard that many people who wanted to vote left because they couldn't wait outside in the cold or stand on their feet any longer. And that's from Linda Watson. I have a bunch of comments that are in my head anyway, but let me try to take them in some sort of semblance of order. The Board of Selectmen does not run the meeting. It is run by the moderator, and I want this to be very, very, very clear. Katie Meserve is an excellent moderator. She is a phenomenal person who runs a very good meeting. None of us, nobody, ever foresaw that we were going to have the voter turnout that we did. The town clerk had prepared 350 ballots out of an abundance of caution, and then 500 people showed up. With the benefit of hindsight, which is always 20/20, there are many things that I wished had happened, some of which you suggested. It concerns this board, not just me, this board greatly, that people who wanted to vote were for many reasons unable to vote. If there is even one person that was unable to vote, that should concern us all. That's not the process. What makes this whole thing work is that everybody is supposed to have that opportunity. I'll be honest with you that we're a little bit at a loss as to how that proceeds. We're working on it, and that's all I can tell you. I have a lot of thoughts on the meeting itself. First of all, I was more than happy with the number of people that showed up. When I said, it was quoted as saying it was twice what is normally at a town meeting, it was actually more than 3 times. At a normal town meeting, we have less than 150 people show up to decide a $5.5 million operating budget. The fact that so many people were passionate enough to stand here, and many of them in the cold for a protracted period of time so that their voice could be heard on this, I believe speaks volumes about people's passion on the issue itself. We knew going in, and I'm going to start off, back up just a whisker here. I am the chairman of this board. I am the elected chairman, and as such, I am the spokesman. Now,
that directs an awful lot of angst and anger toward me, and I say, let it. I could care less. I spend more time worrying about whether I remembered toilet paper on my shopping list than I do of the opinion of some of the people who choose to, through anonymity, be critical of this, of me and this board. No one selectman has any power whatsoever. The only inherent power that the chairman has is he calls the meeting and sets the agenda. That's it. I don't say this to share the blame with my fellow board members, quite the contrary. I want them to share the credit. Because Bob and Sam have been completely engaged on this issue from the get-go. And while many times issues are decided by a 2-to-1 vote, every single decision that has been made on the issue of the beach has been unanimous. Yes, I'm the spokesman. That's because I'm chairman and I'm not afraid to speak in front of people. That doesn't mean that my opinion is any more valuable than theirs, and they have been engaged from the get-go. I want to give a special shout out to Ellen, who, in the middle of budget season, did a tremendous job of putting us in a position where this was potentially successful. The law requires that you literally dot every I and cross every T, and if you don't, then all of your effort will be for naught and it will be thrown out. Ellen worked double overtime in order to make sure that this process was done legally and to keep us in a legal vote. I want to call out a couple of groups, one in particular with a number of waterfront owners who supported this plan. That is a truly selfless position, because they would not have benefited from this beach at all. And yet they chose to vote and to support their fellow residents in having access to the beach, to the lake. I want to call out Joy Gagnon's son. Remind me of his first name, please. Isaac. That little boy showed tremendous courage to stand up in front of 200 people and go to that microphone. And to be honest with you, I would challenge all of those people responsible for the anonymous mailings, the anonymous websites, and from all of the anonymous hatchet jobs that have been done on this board, to watch that meeting, watch him, and then take a good look in the mirror. Because that little boy, excuse me, showed more courage and more testicular fortitude than they have. And I leave it to you to explain to him what that is. Rick Morgan didn't lose that vote. I've told you over and over and over again, I never would have used that beach. Kids like him lost that vote. We knew from the get-go, going in, that 2/3 requirement is a very, very, very hard nut to crack. And it's supposed to be, because you're talking about, one, a lot of money, and two, about tying up the town's resources for several years. We knew it was going to be difficult. It was made doubly difficult by the fact that the owners of the property chose to actively advocate against the town buying it. And to be clear, it's not that they've decided not to sell it. They've decided that they want to sell it to somebody else. Is that fair? Is that right? And is that legal? Are all questions that we will be seeking answers for. To think that it got within literally 15 votes of the 2/3 majority is a little bit of a hard pill to swallow. But I will tell you that it's a lot easier pill to swallow with 468 people voting than if we had lost it with 50 people voting. So we are heartened by who came and the numbers that turned out. One of the real life things, and I actually discussed this with Ed, and it's something we need to think about, if we talk about preventing things like this from happening in the future, you know, we all chagrin the fact that only 150 people show up at town meeting. Well, what in the hell would we do if they all did show up? There is not literally a place in Ossipee where you could host 3,500 registered voters. The old adage, be careful what you wish for, seems to come to mind a little bit. As to the conduct of the meeting, again, with nothing but praise for Katie and our town clerk. They did a great job. With the benefit of hindsight, I think some things should have been different. And there is a process by which that will be looked at. My understanding is that there's a petition amidst for a recount. I've been told, in addition to the emails that are coming here, that there have been inquiries sent to the Secretary of State's office and the Attorney General's and
The senators, the governors.
to the governor and others, and a lot of that, quite frankly, is stuff that is outside of our wheelhouse and outside of our control. How that actually plays out remains to be seen. Anybody want to add anything?
I'd like to speak to Isaac's mom. My heart breaks for Isaac because he stood up, he said his piece, and he learned a very, very difficult lesson that night, that how cruel and how uncaring people can be, especially in a little town like this, and how selfish they can be. And I feel badly that he had to learn that lesson that way. Please give him our best.
I'm hoping that we can teach him some other lessons, and that is to never give up. This issue is not dead. Whether or not it ends up being the property of Camp Secocas or not remains to be seen. But I can tell you that you can't find 63% of anybody to agree on hardly anything in this town. And 63% of you said you want a beach. It's not gonna go away. But it's not gonna go away. I've worked on it for 15 years and I got another 15 left in me. And we'll see what happens. It's not gonna go away. And for those on the lake who are hell-bent, quite frankly, the others won't have access to it, I say get ready, because it's going to happen at some point, one way or the other. Sure.
Hey, Paul Sweigel from Pork Hill Road. I submitted the letter. I just had a question because I heard that there was a number of non-residents in the meeting, and not to say that those people shouldn't have been allowed, but do we have any record of how many there were?
I don't have any record. I do know that there were. Just because I know who some of them are and I saw them there. It's one of the criticisms, again, with the benefit of hindsight. There are those who have said that they should have been asked to give up their seat to make room for registered voters. There are a bunch of things that trouble me, not just that it took 2 hours to get through. What troubles me more is that this was to be set up as a traditional town meeting format. In a traditional town meeting format, you listen and you have the opportunity to participate and hear, debate, and the proposal. There have been many, listen, I'm a huge believer in town meeting. I've missed one town meeting in the last 37 years. There have been many, many times when I came to a meeting thinking I was going to vote a particular way, and then based on what I heard, said, ooh, wait a minute, and changed my mind. That is the purest form of government there is. It's self-rule. It's the ability to hear that debate and hear the presentation. The denial of that is what bothers me more, quite frankly, than people having to wait.
Just with regard to the non-residents, like at some point, theoretically, you know, non-resident protesters could fill up the entire town hall, and then, so how would we, you know, unless I understand that we were checking residents as they entered and giving them the card, but then if we don't know how many people are non-residents, they could displace residents out to the line, and then you could have half of the town out there.
They could, or they could tie up all of your parking spaces so that there's no place to park and therefore no ability to vote. So those are all real-life questions, and I'm not suggesting that that necessarily happened here. I do know that there were a number of non-registered voters here, and that there were registered voters who weren't able to get inside. That's a given. How you address that, quite frankly, I'm not positive. But all of it, and I'm not trying to pass the buck here in any way, shape, or form. Anybody that knows me knows I'm not great at doing that. The conduct of the meeting is completely run by the moderator. And I mean, the moderator has complete and total control. The moderator also will tell you, and told those who could be in the room the other night, that a simple majority of the voters can overrule the moderator. The moderator is not without check and balance. But there again comes back to the argument that so many of the voters were not able to even be in here to hear that instruction that they could overrule the moderator. That is problematical to there being a true check and balance.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to try to interrupt, but in my letter I did state that I did try to address the moderator, and the moderator heard this from myself and another resident voter and said we were just going to vote, and turned around and walked away. And that really confuses me in hindsight, because I think if I had changed my language slightly and said I make a motion that there's I have no idea, but I appreciate the job that Katie Meserve does, and I know that she's a wonderful moderator, but that moment really sticks in my craw and upsets me, because I tried to get the problem addressed, and it wasn't. And I think that was before the vote, and I guess I wish in hindsight that, that she had done something in that moment.
And again, with the benefit of hindsight, I'm sure that as I'm knowing her, I'm quite sure that she has probably run this over in her head 1,000 times since that meeting as well. In hindsight, have regretted that I didn't make a motion to do something prior to the vote actually starting. I was not, from where we were, remotely aware. I mean, I knew the room was full, and I knew there were people in the hallway. I didn't know that there were people lined up down both sidewalks. But I honestly also regret that I didn't make a motion to do something. I was not aware that the problem was the size that it was. And actually, at that point, growing. Yeah.
Katie Doyle Smith, I'm also from Pork Hill Road. And I just wanted to, this has kind of already been said, so I'm just going over things that people have talked about, but just personally, I had come sort of with my ideas about the beach, but I had not been able to attend those previous information sessions. And I was coming hoping to just hear what people were saying. And I had a statement. I also had a couple questions. I didn't know if I was going to be able to bring them all, but I, came prepared to do that evening and felt denied the opportunity to do so. And also, there was a few people standing around me in line who were not clear as to how they were going to vote. They were having conversations with other people standing in line, so it was sort of a bit of hearsay, back and forth about, are our taxes going to increase, or are they not going to increase? Like very simple, basic questions. But the gentleman who was standing right in front of me, a direct quote from him was actually, "I haven't made up my mind. I need to hear both sides of the argument. I'm waiting until I get inside." And he, again, was never able to get inside to hear that. So I don't think, we were the only people feeling that way. And when I finished the meeting, I had kind of come over here to look at a few of the maps that were leaned up against the wall, just to get a sense of actually even where this exact parcel was. And when I was looking at the map, another woman had come up next to me and looked at the map as well and said that she had voted no. And the reason that she had voted no is because she wasn't clear that the public was going to have access, which was just so crazy to me, and I had explained to her, well, this is like the whole reason for this vote is so the public would have access. And then she went off to say, well, that's pretty sad because I have these grandkids who I take to Duncan Lake and we don't even like that beach for A, B, C, D reasons. But I mean, that was somebody who said, oh, I didn't know, like, that the public wasn't gonna have access. But the fact that there was, you know, that basic understanding of people waiting in line who thought their taxes were gonna go up and that the public, they weren't gonna be able to go to the beach is crazy. And again, I really thought that the meeting was kind of part of the vote, sort of like how, you know, we do town meeting and then we decide to pass the budget or not. And so that is my question when we say that the process was legal. I'm just wondering, because of whether or not that meeting was important, I feel it was important, but technically whether or not that was legally supposed to happen for people. That's, you
First of
know.
all, no, please, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I have not used the words that the meeting was legal in any way, shape, or form. At all. I'm simply trying to explain the process. I am told, and I don't know this for fact, do not take it to the bank, that if one single resident petitioned Superior Court to say that they were unable to vote, then the meeting can in fact be deemed to have been an illegal meeting.
Remember that.
Again, I'm only going by second-party hearsay on this, so don't make it, I'm not defending the process, I'm simply trying to explain how we got there in any way, shape, or form.
Can I ask you, you people that were standing outside, were any of you dissuaded from voting?
Dissuaded?
Yeah, I waited a long time. I knew what my vote was. I hear some more people waited.
I'm sorry?
I said, we had
We
waited
all waited.
outside for a while too.
Yeah, everybody waited, you know, so.
I definitely
people
saw people
leave.
leaving. Like, we were
One more time.
in the back of the line and we saw people leaving, for sure.
I'm sorry, Craig Rollins from Center Ossipee. There's a huge difference between someone having the opportunity and the ability and then choosing not to. And if someone was here, there were obviously some folks here who are saying that they waited a considerably long time outside and they still voted. If somebody came and showed up, they were not denied an opportunity, they made a choice. That's what it seems to me.
Right, they did.
And one more thing, I'm sorry. Just a few minutes ago, you congratulated Miss White on her doing double overtime to ensure that this was a legal meeting.
It was.
Let me ask you a question.
Certainly.
For the people who physically could not get into this room,
I didn't say.
hold on a second. I'm asking him a question. For the people who are not physically able to get in this room and participate in the meeting, you don't consider that a problem?
I don't want to comment on that. I will say that there was there or was there not an informational meeting? And was this meeting on the 28th very constricted as to how much time-wise? There was a very, very firm timeline on how much could be said, when it could be said, and how many folks were able to make their point was very structured until it was called to an end, and then voting. Democracy presupposes upon its very constituency the responsibility to have done the research and to be prepared once they enter the polling place. That is another basic tenet of democracy. Is it or is it not?
I absolutely agree, but I also know that the town meeting format, which was used for this, also depends on people having the ability to hear and participate in those discussions if they choose to. I'm not, listen to me, I'm not, don't misunderstand what I'm saying.
Nor I, sir.
I have no problem with the way the meeting was run. Nobody knew that that many people were gonna show up. I'm not suggesting anything nefarious was done, or there was any conspiracy, or that we're sitting here after the fact being sore losers. I do believe if one person was unable to vote, or if a group of people who wanted to participate in the discussion were unable to, then that's a problem. It's not only a problem for this meeting, but it's a problem that, as I'm sorry, your name again, sir? Josh pointed out, it's a problem that we need to address and fix so that it doesn't happen in the future.
Absolutely, and I agree with you on that. However, this meeting had a very short question and answer period, or period for someone to address the meeting. That time period was filled with people. Was it or was it not?
All in favor?
What's that?
There was, I watched the video, there was 10 minutes of recess because they had run out of people to come up to the mic. But I wanted to get up to the mic, and so did my neighbor, and we were out in the parking lot waiting to get into the building.
They couldn't get in.
We could not enter the building.
And that is, I agree with you that that's a shame, but was the meeting, were all the postings? You just said that Ms. White did a great job at making sure all the i's were dotted and t's were crossed. And so what happens is, that meeting was, there were RSAs that dictate exactly where, how many times, and how much notification essentially is necessary.
That's all the stuff that quite frankly leads up to the meeting, and I don't want to water down what I said, because she absolutely dotted the i's, crossed the t's. But to get all of the notices and everything else out, that is completely separate for what actually occurred at the meeting. And again, I don't want to find fault with anybody. Nobody envisioned 500 people showing up. That's what created some real issues.
Yeah, that's true. That's the democratic process at work. Perfect. Yeah.
Well, the fact that people show up is great,
Right.
but they also have to have the ability to participate in the meeting. Sorry.
Well, they were here.
Well, you learn from this one, now you gotta go on.
Okay, hold on.
Need to talk to
Hold
the
on, hold
need to
on.
talk to
One
the
person
chairman.
at a time, two up here. Hold on a second. Tim?
Tim Auerbach, I'm from Grizzly Road, West Ossipee. It's obvious to me, and I think it's obvious to most of us here, that procedurally the meeting went off flawlessly from the standpoint of the procedure. However, the venue did not lend itself to the crowd we had, which, I mean, I got here probably 10 minutes into the moderator's discussion and the presentation by all parties, was fortunate able to sneak into the back corner. Even while I was outside, there were people that left because they just felt they did not have the time to wait. That aside, it was their choice to leave. But when you start to look at the other situation, and that is that, you know, we have this process, this town meeting, and a vote, and you can't isolate the vote from the town meeting. And I think this is something that everybody has to be aware of, and this is something that you're going to get a legal reading on from our town attorney, I would expect, that if people are not able to participate in that meeting portion of the whole event, they would be considered denied access to the whole process. And I congratulate you on looking forward to getting a legal reading on this, because I know it's going to find its way up and down the food chain politically and legally. I, for one, I thought the turnout was just staggering. I mean, I haven't been in town as long as you have, Rick, but I've been to a lot of town meetings and other activities, and, you know, the turnouts are pretty lackluster given the number of, you know, voters we do have, registered voters we do have here. However, with that said, there's a huge lesson we can take from this. that, you know, there are things that will stimulate the population to participate. But when we have a hiccup like this, that waters that down. And, but I think having that legal reading, let's say, from our town attorney would be very, very helpful for those who still have questions, as well as yourselves, as to whether we had a legitimate town meeting and vote or not.
Tony, you wanted that?
Well, I just think, would we be here if the vote went the other way? Say it went to yes, would the no boys be able to come here and say, hey, we don't think it was fair?
Absolutely.
I don't think so. And listen back here, listen, you know what happened that night? People showed what they wanted. It was no. It was no.
You need to check your math.
Well, yeah, check your math.
Hold on a second. 63%.
It doesn't matter, you needed 2/3, Rick, correct?
Listen,
You didn't win the battle.
that's fine.
But you can't say that the majority of the people didn't want it, which is what you
You
just
didn't
said.
need to be the majority. Is that correct, what you said?
I'm not gonna argue with
I'm
you.
not either, but
The fact of the matter
you need to
is,
be
though-
majority.
But you can't sit there and say that most people didn't want it. That's not true.
What I'm saying was, you didn't win, my question was, if it was no, would you be here changing this for us? No.
It's not about changing it. We don't, first of all, we have no power to change anything.
Well, I hope not, because it's gonna be a battle there.
I hope it is a battle,
Yeah.
and it's one that I'm fully prepared for.
Yeah.
Me too.
But the fact of the matter is, anybody, whether you are for it or against it, has the ability to come into this meeting.
I
Let
waited
me-
outside.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
I give you your chance.
Yep, you didn't let me finish.
I did, but-
waited outside just like everybody else did. And all I hear was, we were out back. Well, I was out back too. I was the last one voted in this place, probably. Because I let all these rude people go in front of me to vote. And I did.
And that is wonderful.
And you know what? And you didn't hear me cry. If we'd lost, I would have said, congratulations, you got the beach. But now all I hear is, it was illegal. Something's wrong here. And it ain't.
Well, that's your opinion and you're entitled to it.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is, there are rules for how the meeting is conducted. Would you agree?
Yes, and you ran the rules. You guys ran the show.
No, we don't run the show.
Well, who ran the show?
The moderator runs the
Okay,
meeting.
so we should have her here right now then, answering these questions. What happened?
I'm sure she will make herself available at some point.
But as far as your premise, that somebody who had voted no would not have the same ability to come in and raise these same concerns, that is not valid. It's not
I'm
valid.
gonna say I had to wait outside the code too.
You've said that.
Okay.
But when you said a minute ago
Yeah.
that if this vote had gone the other way, would the people who voted no have the ability to come in here and complain? The answer is yes.
Okay, I like to hear that. Okay, I don't believe it though, but I like to hear that. Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Ed, go ahead.
I'm so glad everybody's here. Just so everybody knows that I represent you down in Concord. You got to take the emotion out of this. And the reason why we have statutes and a government is so we don't let emotions get involved with this. There is a process either way. If anybody feels that they couldn't vote or they were oppressed or somebody beat you up out in the parking lot, you have to go back to the appointing authority that allowed the meeting to commence and have the vote. The selectmen petitioned the Superior Court. The answer is two things. The RSAs state that if you want to recount, you have 7 days to put in an application for a recount, and then it's authorized after the signatures are checked, and you can have a recount. If you think you were oppressed outside, you go back to the Superior Court. It costs $125 or maybe $150 to actually file. You file with the court, and you go to court. Whatever side you're on, if you want to revote, not a recount, revote. You have to go to Superior Court, and the same judge or a similar judge that allowed the town meeting to occur will authorize a revote. Takes all the emotion out of it. If everybody has good points and proof that they were unable to vote for whatever reason, or that the moderator didn't cover, because the judge will look at how the moderator went through every step she was supposed to. It's supposed to be that way. Somebody said before about that maybe it should have been postponed because the capacity of the room was able to hold the amount of people. Well, you can't just ask the moderator to just postpone a meeting. especially when there's a vote involved, because you have to go, you have to repost it, you have to make sure everybody knows there was a vote, and then it has to be reposted, and the whole meeting has to occur again. So the answer to this is to go to the Superior Court, and she will decide if it should be re-voted on or not. Because either way, if you re-vote, you might find out that even more people were against it, or you might find out that even more people were for it. But either way, every meeting has been filmed. Everybody should be able to have been watched all the informational meetings. I believe the selectmen had a separate informational meeting about it, so everybody could be educated. But the rules are clear when voting. I believe, and this is just my opinion, that everybody has to be in earshot of what everybody else is listening to in that meeting. If there were people outside that did not hear and were unable to deliberate before the vote is taken, the judge will have to see that and make her assessment if that actually makes the vote be thrown out. But either way, there's a process.
I have a quick question, just to see if I'm understanding right. So there's no way that the moderator could have postponed and said, there's too many people, we don't have enough room?
It is my understanding under state statute that, especially with voting, it has to be very careful with the postings. Like if you moved the vote somewhere else and then nobody else knew that it was moved, now someone else can say they were denied a vote. That's why you have to have a certain number of days that it's posted. It has to be posted in certain locations, just like public meetings have to be posted in 2 public places.
So basically, when you could have shut it down, someone could have reposted it, put it in the paper, put flyers up, whatever it took to, and give notification that this is gonna have to be revoted on, where we could have ample room for everyone to be here.
Yeah. A couple of things in addition to that may or may not make that possible. One, you understand that this meeting was held with the permission of a Superior Court order, and it specified in that order the date that the meeting was to be held. So it's not just as simple as that. Furthermore, the purchase and sales agreement was due to expire the end of December. So I'm not sure, and I'm not saying that they couldn't have, I'm not sure if there would have been ample time to have reposted and everything, which I know would have been required, to be able to still do it before the purchase and sales expired. In a nutshell, Tammy, I don't know. I don't know if it could have been postponed or not.
Could we have walked across the street to the school and then walked back to vote? Like walked over there to the gym to do the meeting where it's warm, and then walk back here to vote? Would that be legal? Do you know?
I think the same issues would have applied. Because it had been advertised that the meeting was going to occur here. Think about this for a moment. Had that happened, and then anybody who showed up here and didn't know that the meeting had been moved over there would have been denied their ability to participate.
Well, if you post, I'm just wondering for the future, if this was to happen, if you had a person standing at the door to direct everyone, hey, it moved over there, I would have been thrilled if it had been moved over there. But then we would have all been warm, and it would have been great, and we could have had a good vote. I don't think people would mind.
I think it's, again, something that needs to be looked at for the future. I mean, just logistically, I mean, even to get the building opened and those are things that would all had to have been done in advance. The problem became when 500 people showed up where we expected 250. We do have to put something, and I'm sure that knowing Katie Mazar, I'm sure that she's thought a lot about what happens if this happens again. And I'm quite sure that town clerk will be thinking along those same lines as well. There have to be some mechanisms put in place to prevent that from happening again. I don't profess to know what they all might be. Somebody else up and down.
I have a question about registering to vote. I saw quite a few people turned away that evening, and they weren't allowed to register to vote that evening. However, when we went through all the checkpoints and got to the very last one where Katie was standing, taking the ballots, the person behind me wasn't even listed on the books, but yet she had no idea how she got her card, how she got her ballot to vote, and didn't have an answer to that. How does that happen?
She probably registered with the supervisors of the checklist, and it had not yet got into that book, but they were on the list, and Kelly approved it. They had registered with the supervisors of the checklist.
Okay.
It was just we had to write it down.
Okay.
And you could not register to vote that night. The law requires, and again, this is one of the things leading up to that meeting, the law requires that the supervisors of the checklist meet for the purposes of registering new voters 10 days prior to the actual vote. So that did occur. On Saturday, the 18th, the supervisors of the checklist were here. It was advertised. We tried to get the message out as much as we could so that anybody who wanted to vote, again, yes or no, had the opportunity to become a registered voter if they chose to, so that they could participate in the vote. Again, it's one of the requirements of the law, and we abided by it, but you could not register that evening to vote. Somebody else. Sir.
Tom Ragnell from Center Hospital. I was curious if the town meeting concept has to have a vote at that time, or could there be a meeting and the vote the whole next day? Like, because people who work or people who are out of town can't have absentee votes and they can't get here because they're working. That doesn't seem fair either. And the other recommendation I make is, you know, it'd be easy to hook up loudspeakers if you have a little bit of spillover and you don't need to go across the street. I don't know how much that would cost, but it doesn't seem like it'd be that big an expense.
And again, both of those are points well taken. Again, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, you're right, some speakers out in the hallway could have helped tremendously. The idea of the all-day voting is not one that escapes us. The traditional town meeting, which is a really tried and true institution involves that listening to debate and then casting your ballot. Given this, do I wish that we had all-day voting? Yeah, I do. I do. It wasn't to be, and that's, you know, I'm not sure if it could have been. I'm not sure, quite frankly, if it could have been done. But nobody anticipated more than 200 to 250 people showing.
First of all, is there provisions that would allow for an all-day vote the next day? And could you put the town meeting online that night so people could still have the opportunity to avail themselves of the information and vote the next day, and then have a whole day of voting, and then nobody can complain that they weren't allowed to vote?
Thank you. My name is Molly Messenger. I'm a registered voter in Ossipee on Port Hill Road. Like others that are present, just wanting to express my concerns for the record. And I want to lead by saying I don't think that this fell on any particular person or group that's at fault, but it was a perfect storm of really like none of us taking that ownership that evening. And so with an invested interest of however someone takes a stance on an issue, for me, wanting to see more and more people turn out. When I arrived, I was really excited, like giddy, and connecting with people in line, and soon as an hour plus passed and we're still waiting outside, feeling this growing concern of the impact this will have for folks turning out for the first time, the impact this has for young people as they're witnessing this, about when they're turning 20 or 18 to be able to vote. And concern for my neighbors who physically were unable to like stand that long, or who had children, like they were going to swap with another parent to be able to come out and vote or participate in the info session. There was a rumor mill out there, and at part of it we were lined by people that were against the vote. And so I'm really concerned about the misinformation not being able to dispel some of the myths that were out there, and the impact and implication this is going to have.
I asked that question earlier, if you would dissuade you, somebody was trying to dissuade you from voting the way you wanted to vote, and you just said yes, there was.
There was a lot of conversation in the hall of folks talking about how they felt about it. So certainly getting to hear from neighbors that were for the vote and others who are against the vote. So yeah, there was conversation.
Your comment about, while everybody's still here, your comment about the misinformation is one that, you know, it concerns me, and it has concerned me. And it was due to be discussed later in our agenda, but this whole premise about our taxes going up, and I've been screaming from the rafters that it wasn't going to. We couldn't get our tax rate finalized until after this special town meeting, as per DRA rule. And our tax rate was finalized on Thursday. And the town tax rate went down 27 cents a thousand. That brings, over the last 4 years, we have cut the town tax rate by 61 cents per thousand. So the entire premise, and it was always this way, that taxes were going to go up by buying this beach, is now, it was then, a lie. And it has continued to be a lie. The only soul searching that I've had over the last few days is the frustration of wondering how we could have better got that message out. We begged people to do the math, as the opposition sign said, because we know the math, and the math was clear. Taxes were not going to go up by the acquisition of this beach, and again, with hindsight and the fact that we couldn't ascertain until after the meeting, the town tax rate went down 27 cents a thousand.
Just to offer up a few suggestions, thinking just forward. In some rural communities where this is also the situation, where the capacity might of the town hall meeting space is smaller, there's like a location really close nearby where it's it's live streaming, so you can see the info session and then be able to participate in the vote immediately after, and it's nearby, so it's even, you can walk or just drive next door. Also having anyone to be able to come back to share with people standing in line. Hopefully we avoid people just having to wait like that in the future. But it was like, folks were so eager. If someone would come back to go to the bathroom and be like, what's going on? And they'd, share a quick comment or say like, this is what I just learned about taxes or something. But there was no like clear message like, what's happening right now? And the registration table so far that we couldn't even get the agenda. I think the last thing I just want to ask a question is, what are the terms of the purchase and sales? It's the end of December, and then?
It was the end of December or until such time as we could hold a legal meeting.
A legal meeting.
So, somebody else, sir.
Regulation Center Ossipee, where it was voted no. What about taking 5, 10, 15, 20 grand and scrubbing up Duncan Lake so the kids do have a nice beach to go to? I'm sure some people here would even volunteer. I would help. 5, 10, 15 grand compared to 1.2, 1 million, whatever the magical number is, which doesn't account for incidentals along the way. I think you're going to have a lot more people on board. Granted, it's not on the big lake, but boy, that's a beautiful spot if it's scrubbed up a little bit.
Kyle Copeland, Center Ossipee. Just a question on the tax rate thing you just mentioned, Rick, there. You said 27 cents a thousand is what it's supposed to go down now at this point without the purchase of the beach. Out of curiosity, what would that rate have been with the purchase of the beach?
Well, what I said and what the math proves is if the revenues had stayed completely stagnant, which they did not, and haven't, and don't for years, if the revenues had stayed completely stagnant, and the impact on the tax rate was 12 cents per thousand, okay? That assumes zero growth, which never happens. I pointed out in the information meeting, and as many times as I could say, every year, every time somebody adds onto their house, every time somebody puts on a deck, every time somebody builds a new house, you increase your tax base. We increased the tax base between 2016 and 2017 by $7 million. Based on the building permits that we've got going out on a regular basis now, that is only going to go much, much higher. I mean, the building, as you well know, I'm sure in your neighborhood, is coming back. But even at a time when there was zero growth, when the town lost $65 million in town value during the recession, even during that time, we built a highway garage down back, paid $465,000 in cash, and still reduced the tax rate that year by 4 cents per thousand. So the fact of the matter is, and it's not just judging us by what I say, judge us by what we've been able to do. I've laughingly said that town budgets are not rocket science. It's the same way you run your household, it's the same way I run mine. It's just the numbers are a whole lot bigger. If you control growth with this board, and I don't want to take complete credit because there's a couple of members of the budget committee here, This is a really wide effort. It starts with our department heads who start off with responsible budgets. It's the Board of Selectmen, it's our finance team, it's the budget committee, it's the town treasurer. We have worked really, really hard together to control growth, and to control growth to grow at a lower rate than what the revenues are. If you do that, you can still continue to do major projects, which we have done, and you can still continue to lower the tax rate. I simply wish the county, the school district, the state, and the federal government would take some lessons.
I definitely understand exactly what you're saying. I mean, I think you should be commended as a Board of Selectmen and the way the town's been managed as far as how our taxes have gone in recent years especially. It's been great. That's not, no one's going to argue with you on that. Even folks over on the lake that are paying big money in taxes, they're happy that the taxes are as low or haven't continued to rise, that they've gone down a little bit each year. That's great. But keep in mind that when you say that people's taxes won't go up as a result of the beach, that's a little bit misleading though, because if there's no beach, yes, our taxes will still be lower, but they would be even lower without the beach because there's still an expenditure there. The town's still spending money on that bond. There's still other expenses. Yes, I understand we've got the capacity in some of our town offices to be able to handle some of that stuff, and that's good as well. But by the same token, it's scary to folks who pay a lot of money in taxes already that are afraid that, boy, there's another thing that's going to make our taxes go up even more. In a situation like a lot of folks I know many friends I grew up with. I've been here my entire life on Ossipee Lake. And a lot of my friends are no longer living in the neighborhood anymore. And the reason why is their taxes went up to a point where their families could no longer afford to keep those places. And people who don't live on the lake, I don't expect sympathy from them. I just got lucky that I happened to be born into a family that had a place. We bought it for 10 grand in 1967. It was good foresight by my grandfather to do so. And I happen to be the only grandchild, so I'm the lucky one who gets it now. And my wife and I live here full time and made our home here. I make a business here. I have another business in Wolfboro. We're trying our best to make a living here, but it's expensive to live here when you've got that huge nut every year that you've got to pay in taxes. So it gets tough for me to sit back as someone who, I've tried to kind of stay on the outskirts of this and listen to what everybody has to say from both sides of both the for and against the town beach, for and against higher taxes, any of the above. That's what democracy is about. I love what you said here. I thought it was very eloquent the way you put that. But I will say that you have to keep in mind that there's priorities that some people feel are more important than others, and a town beach isn't as important as what some other people feel the money should be spent on. So I just feel like right now the town spoke. Everybody had a chance to vote. I'm sorry that not everybody made it inside. My wife and I got here at 6:10. We pulled in the parking lot. We were sitting down up front 5 minutes before anybody started talking. There were seats still available after people were talking. They kept saying, come in, sit down, more people up front, there's spots up front. There was ample opportunity for people to get in here. I'm sorry that people didn't get here. I know people have to work. That was the problem with having a 1 hour voting window. I agree that it should be a whole day kind of thing. A lot of people I know have to switch things around in order to get here to be able to even make it at all for the vote. But I've spoken a lot here, that's all. I just appreciate it. Just want to be on record as saying I do appreciate the work you're doing on the taxes. Good stewardship of our money is a very important thing, and we appreciate that.
Just a couple of quick responses to things you said. You're right. If we hadn't bought the beach, then maybe your taxes would go down more. But that also presumes that no other projects are done. One, okay? What I said was a lie, and what was a lie, and what was spread through lies, and what was spread as anonymous mailings, etc., was that you were going to have a huge tax increase if that was proposed. That's the language that they were using. They used it to scare people off. It was not true then, it was not true now, and as I said, with showing what the tax rate has gone down, should conclusively prove to people that it would not have caused them to have a tax increase. Would they have gone down more without them with it? Sure. I mean, that's common sense. But they were not going, with the democracy comes some responsibility, and I'm a huge believer in free speech. Don't get me wrong. But when you actively tell somebody something which you know is not true or should know is not true in order to influence somebody else's vote, then I think, quite frankly, that's the place when we would part ways as far as agreement.
Just one quick comment.
Sure.
I mean, politics in general, do they ever tell us the truth about anything from either side? Like, come on, seriously.
Well, I hope you would agree, and there's nothing, and I certainly my record speak for itself, that we have been completely honest and forthright in this process, and anybody that says otherwise, I'd love to see improvement. Somebody else? If not, we're gonna move on to our regular town business. Sure.
So when we were talking earlier about the purchase and sales, that expires the end of December?
I believe it expired when the meeting was conducted. I don't know.
Okay, that's what I was confused about. If it expired then, or if it's gonna expire December or whatever. Does that mean that if it did expire when the meeting, now if they decide that there is gonna be another meeting, that still holds? I'm confused about that.
Those are all issues which would have to be determined by a court.
Correct, yeah. Okay, and I will say, my family is right next door, which some of you know, some of you don't know. Right next door to Camp Secaucus. And my whole family, my nieces, my nephews, my brothers, everybody, we had to take a vote amongst ourselves what we wanted. 1 week it was one way, 1 week it was another. Because we kept hearing all these things. And we know we can't believe some of the stuff, because that's politics, like you said. I've been in this town for a long time. I've always wanted a beach for Ossipee. That was one of the things I always said. Let's try. And we've had opportunities to get beaches. Bamford was one. Harry Merrill working with you, Rick, across to Long Sands was another one. The vegetation people said we'd be killing a green leaf or something. So we couldn't do it there. There's always been something. Then even we heard, the second week of this discussion, oh, well, they were gonna give them 90 feet of beach if the other people bought it. So we thought, oh, well, why wouldn't they take that? Well, because when I talked to Rick, Rick said, oh no, because there's no parking. Every time I've been to Rick, he has told me, I'm pretty sure, the truth. Regardless how we were gonna vote. I felt I got the truth. I also felt that I got the truth from the other side. So it was a very hard decision. And I love Ossipee. I've volunteer work in Ossipee for a long time. My heart broke when I heard the little boy up there. Who wouldn't? Of course he wants a beach. I wanted a beach. I was lucky enough to have one when I was growing up there. But the thing we had to think about were the pros and cons. And one of the things was we lived next door to Camp Secaucus, and there was never a problem. And when we heard that all of a sudden the owners didn't want to sell to the town, we're thinking, what's going on here? How come they don't want to sell to the town? Is there something going on we don't know about? What's happening here? Is there something we don't know? But one thing we did know, we went down to Duncan Lake, and we thought, oh gosh, we don't want this beach, this lovely beach, to end up, being trashed, or people going to the bathroom beside our house because they don't want to walk up to the outhouses or something. And yes, it was good because it was going to be closed at night. That was a good thing. But then there was the other thing. Were we going to have to call the police if something wasn't right? They said there's going to be no drinking. But who's going to patrol that? Who's going to be down there saying, are you drinking? Are you drinking? And then there was the other good part. There was going to be no boats and docks. Oh, but on the other side, this went on and on. I can't even mention all of them. But in the process, I was actually thinking, how do I actually tell anybody what my final vote is until I go to that meeting that night? Because in my heart of hearts, I didn't even want to tell my family, and I'm the one that has to be the voter because they're non-residents. I have to go and support them and what they've decided. They took a vote and said, we're going to have to, after all these weeks, said yes, no, yes, no. My brother even came to the meeting, talked to Rick, talked to Jim Rhines, wanted to be on the committee. How close can you get to a yes? That was it. We thought there was a final decision here. And the next thing you know, there was something else. So this has just been traumatic for everybody in our family and for my neighbors, your neighbors. You live a mile away. Harry's our neighbor. And some of us said yes, some of us said no. But there was reasons behind it, and whether it's right or wrong, we don't want to feel, oh my God, we stopped this little boy from getting a beach, or we're cruel, or anything like that. No, we had our own reasons for whether we had to say no, and it might have been a very thin line here. But it came down to, let's take the pros on this piece of paper, let's take the cons on this piece of paper, and hope we've come to the right decision. And that's what we had to do. Now I'm concerned because I'm saying, yes, it was terrible that these people couldn't get in here, but some of them did regardless. They got in here, and they were able to vote. Now Ed was standing beside me over here at the beginning, and then he had to leave for a while. He said, oh, they won't be voting for a little while, so I'll leave. He left, he came back. At the very end, he came back, and all these other voters came in, and they were, oh yeah, we got in, we got in. Now I heard of a lot of people that did get in. It might have been towards the end, but they get in. And I felt bad for the people that had to leave. But that's not to blame anybody here or anybody. They did the best they could for what they had to work with, never thinking this was going to happen. Live and learn. And maybe we'll have to do it all over again. I don't know, whatever the court says. But I just wanted to know tonight. Now, the owners said they don't want to sell it to the town. So if they don't, how do you go back, get an okay to vote again if they don't want to? I don't know where it stands, and I don't know if you guys know it either. Yeah.
Well, first of all, Ann knows me, and I'm going to say this with a great deal of affection. It takes her 5 minutes to tell you who her name, what her name is.
I don't say hello in 200 words.
So that is not said with any animosity whatsoever. We're friends. Your points are all very valid, and I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form, nor will I. When I said earlier about people, calling out the lakefront owners who supported it and how I thought it was really selfless, I'm not at all saying that there aren't lakefront people who chose to vote no for very righteous reasons. That's up to them, and I'm not suggesting otherwise. The issue that has arisen, and it wasn't correct, our fault, it's not Katie Mazur's fault, it's not the town clerk's fault, is more people showed up than what were planned on. There is a valid question. I don't care whether you voted no or you voted yes. There is a valid question which needs to be answered, and that is, were everybody able to participate in the meeting? It's not just stand in line and vote. The fact that people stood in line for 2 hours is wonderful. What about the person who can't stand for 2 hours? Those questions need to be answered. They need to be answered. And there will be somebody, and it will not be us ultimately that decides that answer. It will most likely end up being somebody in the road. Somebody else.
Thank you.
Sir?
Stone, George Corner Road. Just one question. Is the vote, as it stands right now, legal and binding? As it stands right now. And has anybody gone to the court and said that they were denied the right to vote?
I do not know.
So I would assume that the vote on the 28th is a legal and binding contract?
As it stands
Right now, as we're sitting here.
unless the court deems otherwise, then it is yes.
And that 7-day period is coming up to an end here.
It is.
Okay.
The 7 days is a requirement
To apply.
recount.
Okay.
There's no 7-day limitation on going, for anybody to go to court or otherwise, that I'm aware of. Sir?
Just one last thing, just in response to what you said a minute ago about, and you didn't say this, but Sam, I will say, you've been in the paper multiple times with letters to the editor lately, calling people un-American, cowards. Tonight, called people selfish, called them cruel. These are the kind of things that stir up people's emotion. I don't think that that's an appropriate thing for a selectman to say, and I don't think that turns people out to the polls in the future, is all I have to say on that.
To address that, my comments were not addressed at you, but addressed at the people that ran the campaign that they ran. And they were selfish, and they were unkind. They did this anonymously without ever putting their face or their name to any of the signs or any of the websites or anything else that they did. So it could have been your neighbor, it could have been my neighbor. I have no idea who did it, but if you're going to do something like that, then speak up and stand up and show your face. Don't be a coward.
I disagree.
Danny Fishbein, Center Ossipee. How will you know if somebody was turned away from the meeting, other than, you just gonna guess, or how does this work for somebody to take it to court?
We are in receipt of the ones that I read to you here.
Right.
I know the phone has rung off the hook. We have suggested to people that if, and I would say for the purposes of this recording, that if anybody has a complaint, they should put it in writing. This can take on a life of its own when he said, she said, he did, or what.
But, you know, all it takes is that one vote, or one person, not to feel they were involved, to bring it to court.
Anybody that feels that their ability to participate in the meeting or their ability to vote was impacted should absolutely please supply that in writing. If you don't have to involve the Board of Selectmen if you don't choose to. The Secretary of State's office, the one that oversees elections. Communicate with Katie Meserve, the moderator, or the town clerk. I mean, this meeting, we did all of the legwork to get to the meeting.
Right.
We don't run the meeting. That is completely outside of our area of responsibility.
The body runs the meeting.
Well, the body runs the meeting, but specifically the moderator runs the meeting. And I'm going to say, that's not to throw Katie Meserve under the bus at all. Right. She's a good moderator, a good person. She runs a good meeting. But she is the one, the moderator, elected moderator is the one that controls the meeting, not the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
And rightly so. I mean, it's us that normally goes in and proposes the budget, etc. Anybody else? Tim?
Yeah, Rick, real quick, and we are having a little bit of a semantic thing here, and I think we should clear that up right now. My understanding, and again, it's just my understanding, that no one was physically turned away, but the question is, and it should remain, did everyone have the opportunity to exercise their right to vote? Regardless of whether somebody thinks they were turned away or not, you have to use the appropriate language that, and you know, the issue is, we have a right to vote as a registered taxpayer and whatever voter in this town and anywhere. And so we want to be careful with our semantics and certainly be aware that we want to assure that everyone had the opportunity to exercise their right to vote.
And I would only add to that, and to participate in the meeting itself.
This is exactly why I brought that point up a little bit ago, is that did the question and answer period and the comment period, was that construed as, or was it legally part of the vote process? And if people couldn't participate in it, then they were not allowed to exercise. This is the legal question that's going to have to be answered elsewhere. Right. Thank you, Rick.
If not, I'm going to move on to the other town business. First thing in the red folder is the minutes of the Selectmen's meeting, which occurred on Monday, November 27th. I make a motion to accept them as printed. All in favor? Aye. We have the minutes of the Selectmen's work session in non-public, which occurred on Monday, November 27th. I make a motion we accept them as printed. All in favor?
Mr. Chairman, very inaudible what you're saying.
Sorry.
So I don't know.
Folks, if I could ask you, if you're going to have conversations, if you could have them out in the hall, because we have the rest of our business to get to. Sorry. Not sure if it was interfered with that, but we did a motion and second and voted to accept the Selectmen's meeting minutes, which occurred on Monday, November 27th, and also the minutes of the Selectmen's work session, which occurred on Monday, November 27th. Sorry. You have the check voucher totals. The payroll for week ending 12/2 is $57,617.24. Accounts payable for week ending, it's not on there.
We didn't do accounts payable this week.
Okay. We didn't do accounts payable, so the total dispersed this week was just the payroll, $57,617.24. I make a motion we sign.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've already reported on the tax breakdown which was set. Reduction of the town of Ossipee tax rate last year was $6.29 per thousand, and it is now $6.02 per thousand. We have a contract to use of facilities for a birthday party. I don't know if the schedule has been okayed.
It has been.
It has been? I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have a contract to use of facilities, again for, well, this is for a Christmas party. Schedule's been okayed. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I knew that was coming, excuse me. Whew. Is this a new format for these?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a state approved.
There's 4 of them here, and these are the new warrants for the collection of timber taxes. The first one is for map 251 lots 3 and 4. We have the tax collector collect $437.28, and make a motion we sign.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There are 2 places it needs to be signed. Next is a timber warrant. This is for map 8, lot 2. Collect $3.75. I make a motion we sign.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The timber tax warrant, this is on map 8, lot 1. Collect $48.66. I make a motion we sign.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Leave it to the state to make the forms more complicated. And this is for map 65, lot 1, instructing the tax collector to collect $1,902.27. I make a motion to sign.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This is the warrant for the collection of taxes. Again, they could not finalize the rate or mail the tax bills until after the special town meeting. But this is the warrant instructing the tax collector to collect $6,751,869.18. It's a lot of money, even saying it fast. We have some notices of decision. This one's from the zoning board. Case number 117-9-V of Philip Valari. Variance is granted. Notice from the planning board on case 17-9-SPR, Verizon and H&R Block. Granted a conditional site approval. Planning Board, notice of decision on 17-10-SPR, Ossipee Granite Recovery. The application was not accepted as complete, and the applicant was referred to the ZBA for a variance. We have the report of our dog officer here in the folder if anybody'd like to look at it. We have a public notice put out by Executive Council and the Hampshire Department of Transportation. This is pursuant to RSA 228:99 and RSA 240. It's on behalf of the Governor's Advisory Commission on Intermodal Transportation. Purpose of there'll be a meeting this meeting will be December 4th, which is today. The door's opening at 5:30, which is 5 minutes ago. And people are allowed to write comments until 12 p.m. tomorrow on the proposal to increase the tolls on the state highway. We have a thing from Kelly on boat agents for boat registration. I will abstain from that because it involves people that I work with at boat shops, so we'll have to put it in the folder for next week to the office. And we have a payroll reimbursement request from the Water and Sewer Department in the amount of $5,084.03. I'll make a motion to sign.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we have a water and sewer warrant for the tax collector to collect $80. I'll make a motion to sign.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Includes the red folder. Under old business, we certainly have covered the town beach. Brad is not here on 171 or the covered bridge.
171 and 28, you pass along the message that the construction will take place in 2020. They're going to be taking 2018 and 19 to square up land acquisitions that are required. Construction is expected for 2020.
Okay. Anything, did he have anything on covered bridge or the sidewalks?
Nothing new on the covered bridge.
Okay.
And nothing on the sidewalks.
Anything else under old business? No?
No.
Okay. New business, sorry, FB Environmental, Ossipee Watershed Management Plan. Sir.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Great. That's a little better.
Yeah, why don't we just do one? Yeah, leave the other row. Yeah, that's good. You guys see that okay? Thanks for your time. My name's Forrest Bell. I'm the owner of FB Environmental. Have an office in Portland, Maine, and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Been working on natural resource protection projects for 30 years now. And I'm really here representing myself and giving a very quick overview of this watershed plan for Ossipee Lake. I'm going to be talking to several towns over the course of this month. So thanks for the 10 or 15 minutes tonight. I'm going to try to really go low on the technical information and just try to hit the key points of the plan. Certainly one of them is why do we develop it, and when we're thinking about lake protection, about Ossipee Lake, I like to look at it as it's the industry of your area. People come to this region in large part because of Ossipee Lake and your other lakes, but certainly this is the gem, and I've gotten to learn a lot about your lake in the last 3 months. So when we're talking about lake protection and watershed protection, it's a long-term process. We have to be cautious of our activities around the lakes. I've seen a lot of really good examples, and I've seen a lot of really poor examples of stewardship, if you will. And with Ossipee Lake, like any lake, we really just have to, make sure that you know, we don't have these eroded areas going into the lake, that we protect our shorelines, which are very, very sensitive, and keep the water as clear as possible. Property values are important. There are some very good studies done by well-known professors that have shown that with every meter of how clear the lake is that you lose, there's up to about $10,000 of a loss in property value. And I've been on some lakes, and I'll show you a couple quick pictures where I've seen that. The main issue in lakes is phosphorus. It's one of the major nutrients needed for plant growth, and it's naturally present in small amounts. We have phosphorus in us, there's phosphorus in the atmosphere, there's a lot of phosphorus in the soil. And so when I showed that picture of the erosion, that's actually pollution if that soil is making it into the lake in too many amounts. We measure phosphorus in Ossipee Lake in parts per billion, okay, just to give you an idea of how tiny an amount we're talking about, okay? And phosphorus is, as you know from maybe fertilizers, when you fertilize your lawn or the nearby golf course, it's a nutrient like nitrogen and potassium and other nutrients. And basically, when we get situations like this, which I don't know if you can see, but these are all lakes in Maine and New Hampshire that I've worked on. I took these pictures that turned a pea soup green. And that's because there was too much phosphorus, and it basically tipped the scales for these lakes. There's lots of very complex scientific things that go into whether a lake is going to turn green or not, and that's what we spend a lot of time looking at for Ossipee Lake. But the message here is this is what we're trying to prevent in the long term. If you go into southern parts of our country, a lot of the lakes look like this. Lake Okeechobee, you might have heard about a year ago. They had some agricultural issues, and they had some tremendous algae blooms down there. These can be toxic. They can be fatal, so it's a human health concern as well. And you know, my job is to make sure people are educated about this and that we're doing what we can, and that's what I've devoted my career to doing. Lakes age naturally, okay? So in a oligotrophic lake like Lake Tahoe in California, if you've had a chance to be there, it's clear, it's deep, you can see way down, you have some great trout and salmon in there. And then you have a lake like Province Lake nearby here that's what's called eutrophic, and there's lots of plants in it. You're going to be finding pickerel and bass and other fish instead. So this is a natural process. But the problem that we've seen, and this has been studied a lot, is that this is supposed to happen in tens of thousands of years, and under human influence, it's happening in decades or centuries. And I know it may seem far away, that we're going to have a degradation of Ossipee Lake, but we can make decisions now and take actions now to protect the lake. So again, the goal is to slow down this process, and it can be done. So we did a watershed management plan for the lake. It's almost complete. A draft will be released in the next few weeks. And basically what we do is we work with the public. We had a public steering committee. We inventory the watershed, what's happening on the land, and how might that be affecting the water. What are the potential problems? How can we fix the problems? What are the actions to fix the problems? This is my favorite part because there's lots of good plans out there that people don't act on. So I like to see actions. Try to fix things. Then look, hey, is the stream that's running into the lake doing better? Is the lake healthier? And you have to look at this over a long time. These things happen, and I know I've already said it twice already, but these things happen slowly, and we just have to be aware and keep measuring and seeing if we're doing the right thing. I'll add that technology has been changing since I've been doing this work. The engineering of how we treat stormwater has improved tremendously. In 10 years, it's going to improve again. In 20 years again. So we need to think about that as we move on, that what we suggest now, it might be different in 10 years. Here's Ossipee Lake. This is a huge watershed, 380 square miles, one of the bigger watersheds in comparison to the size of the lake that I've ever worked on. Here's Province Lake here, here's Freedom, here's Ossipee. 14 towns, so everything, any water that falls in here or snow that melts up here in the mountains, you know, it's either going to make it into the groundwater or it's going to make it into the rivers and streams and into Ossipee Lake and then eventually out this way. So the flow of water is basically in all these directions toward Ossipee Lake, out through the bays, and out from there. It's the 7th largest lake in New Hampshire. Many of you probably already knew that, and it's a phenomenal resource. This is one of my favorite places I've been anywhere. I really, I know why people want to live here and want to vacation here. The aquifer is something of concern as well. You've got great drinking water in your area, very important to protect. What happens on the land, above the ground, impacts in the ground. How much we salt our roads, for example, that's just something we have to take into concern. I promised I wouldn't get into great detail about water quality. It's all in the plan, but a lot of people ask me, well, how is the water quality of Ossipee Lake? Well, so imagine this is excellent, and the blue is nice clear water, and then this darker brownish reddish color is when it starts getting worse. That stands for phosphorus that I talked about already. Chlorophyll A is really the green pigmentation, the algae that I showed you the other pictures of, and that's the disc, Secchi disc, that we use to lower into the lake to measure how clear the lake is. If your numbers are above this line, in this case it's a bad thing. That means you can see less than 2 meters down. So where is Ossipee Lake? Here you go. So we're not quite in the excellent range. We're in the middle. It's a pretty clear lake. The phosphorus levels are low for the most part, but they're slowly rising. Okay, so this is what we have to look at. And this is also happening, again, with how far you can see into the lake. And Lake Tahoe, this was a big deal. Property values went way down. There's a lot of protections there in Lake Tahoe to keep that from happening. So this is just a very basic overview of kind of what's there, and there's a lot of detail that goes into this. All these little colors here are sub-watersheds of that big watershed that I showed you. So what you can do is actually break it down into these smaller pieces of the pie and figure out what's happening in these areas. Like this stream needs some work here, or this area directly around the lake. It's such a big area that when we did the science and we did the modeling to measure it, we decided to look at it this way. Otherwise, it's just too vast. So the build out, I'm just going to show you one slide on this. Some very basic information from the build out, and again, the methods are all there and out there, happy to share with anybody. These colored areas on this map are developable lands within your town, okay? So 51% of the land in the town of Ossipee are developable. So it's about 50-50. These areas that aren't developable are either protected lands, they're steep slopes, so you can't build, they're wet, really wet soils or hydric soils, or lands that are already built out and you can't find a space anymore. We did this by zone, so the green is the rural zone, so these areas are still developable, and then you have your village zone here, so we broke it out by zone. To me, this is a very interesting tool that you can use in many different ways. I, as a professional, believe in economic growth, and I also believe in environmental protection. These, in my opinion, cannot be competing. They need to work together, and that's, again, one of my strong messages. I hate it when they compete. I understand what happens, but you need to develop, you need to build your town and your tax base, and you need to do it in a good, smart, sensible way. So that's, again, the message. We have a 1 acre zoning in this rural area, as you know, and that means there's a potential for a lot of buildings to come in in the next 100 years or so. A lot of the towns in the surrounding area have the 5-acre minimum zoning in these areas. I'm not going to say one is better than the other. That's not really my place. I'm just saying that that's what went in. Based on the population growth rate in your town over the last 30 years, so we look back at, we looked at 10 years, we looked at 20, we went back at 30, so we had different places to choose from, and it's all in the report, the science is all there. The town could potentially be built out if everything stays the same and the population growth and the building growth stays the same in the year 2107, so 80 or so years from now. So that sounds like a long ways away, but it all depends on your perspective. And again, that's a static look at what's there now. And I'm not going to stand here and be on TV and say that this model is absolutely right and this is the way it's going to be, because it's not. It's going to change. Things are going to change. We understand that, but now that the work has been done, it can be updated and the science can continue to be improved. So I always am careful in public to make that sense that a model is only as good as the information going in, and then things do change moving forward. So, some potential things that could be done is clustering of these smaller areas. It all depends on what the planning board and the selectmen and the voters and other groups in the town want to do. We did the information. My job is to be a scientist and non-biased and hopefully inform some good decisions. We did a shoreline survey as part of the watershed plan, going by boat around the lake and evaluating parcels. Basically giving them ratings. This is qualitative, if you will. Anything in the orange, there could be some work that could be done there, because that buffer zone, that first 200 feet around your lake where people live is a very sensitive area, right? The runoff wants to go through there. That's where the critters like to live. It's the most sensitive area of your lake. So basically, what we've learned through time is that you can make improvements on these private properties or public properties, and they don't have to be expensive and they don't have to look bad. This is an example of infiltration steps. You make a meandering path from your house down to the lake. You have some nice stone in there that you can walk on bare feet, and you've enhanced the area. You've done some nice landscaping, and you've also kept some of that phosphorus from going into the lake because you don't have that soil erosion. All right, so these are examples. A lot of good work has been done over at, I mentioned Province Lake and Great East Lake, so there's some good examples nearby, as good as any place I've seen, of some good practices that can be done. And in some cases, these youth conservation corps have been hired, where you have high school students from the local area out here helping landowners on their property. I think it's a great program in my opinion, and it doesn't cost a ton of money either. And the landowners love it because they're protecting their lake that they live on, and they're also getting some nice landscaping done. So a possible recommendation for Ossipee Lake for the future. I mentioned the action plan. These are the 5 main categories. We had a public meeting 2 years ago now, maybe it was last year in Freedom. And here we are talking about, so these are the areas that the action plan focuses on: septic systems, what people can do, looking at septic system inputs, especially pre-1970 septic systems, which I've seen a lot of problems in my career. Some of those shorefront, BMP stands for Best Management Practice, so those steps I showed you, that's an example of that. Roads, what we can do for roads, especially the camp roads we built 50, 60, 80 years ago that are pointing towards the lake. If we treat those roads and treat the water coming off the roads, you can make a huge difference. You can keep hundreds of pounds of phosphorus from going into Ossipee Lake. And remember, we measure in parts per billion, so hundreds of pounds is actually a lot in this case. Smart planning, land conservation in strategic areas, have your development areas, have your areas you want to protect, and then water quality monitoring, again, just making sure you're measuring this the right way and providing good hard science about what's happening to the lake and the nearby streams. The estimated cost in the plan to basically keep Ossipee Lake where it's at, and again, this is not an exact figure, this is obviously an estimate, is about $575,000 over 10 years, so $50,000, $60,000 a year. That's not a cost to your town. That's basically a cost to do the actions that we put in the plans. There's some road improvements that can be done in there. There's some improvements to private property that can be done in there. There's some upgrades to septic systems that can be done in there. It's you know, we look at lake protection, we call it, you know, death by 1,000 cuts. This is just taking care of some of those, I guess, hot areas or the potential areas that you could really make a difference if you did some environmental management there. Keeping the momentum going, it's about the people. It's about the people that live here. It's not about the consultant from, you know, a different town or whatever. It's about stewardship and what's happening here. Obviously, you got to find state grants, federal grants, whatever is out there to do it. And then adaptive management is a fancy term we use, which is basically what I said before. This watershed plan needs to be a living document. Things are going to be so different in your town 10 years from now. I don't know what they're going to be like. I can make some guesses, maybe even some educated guesses, and so can you. But a watershed plan needs to be revisited because for that reason. And the really good ones that I've seen work in communities where I've seen a lot of really good things happen, people are actively working with that plan and paying attention to it. So that's it. My thanks for your time. Hopefully some of these were good messages. I don't know if the selectmen have any questions. Yes?
Maybe back to slide channel, when you gave the levels of where Ossipee Lake stands for chloroform A.
Yep.
There you go. The next one there.
Yep.
And you mentioned that the phosphorus rate is on the increase. How much is it increasing over what period of time?
Ooh, I can't say I've committed that to memory, but it is in the plan. I'd have to get you that information. I actually had a slide and I took it out because I didn't want to. Yeah, no.
But that to me would be a very important indicator on, it's one thing, I mean, right now that doesn't look really bad.
Right.
But were we much clearer 10 years ago or 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Was the phosphorus level noticeably less 10 years and 20 years ago?
Right.
It would at least then show if we are heading in the wrong direction.
That's right. That's right. That's a really good question, and that's what a lot of the plan, I probably should have left the slide in there, but that's what a lot of the plan goes over. We actually do these fancy statistical tests to basically test that. In some cases, there's not enough data, so it's not statistically significant to be able to say something. In other cases, it is. I will say the dissolved oxygen levels, so the amount of oxygen in Ossipee Lake and also the lower bays, there is a declining trend downward. It's not a steep trend, but it's more like, you know, if I showed you the picture up there, it's more like this. Danforth Pond is also, because that's kind of at the end of the chain, that has some significant problems as well, and we've engaged the people there as well. But this is a really good sign that your algae levels, you know, are pretty low. So you have some good environmental factors, and you also have we measure lakes by flushing rates, so how often the water basically moves through the system. And once the water gets out of Ossipee Lake and into those lower bays, it's really cruising through there. It almost functions like a slow-moving river. So that's good. So, you know, stuff's going down through the Saco and out into the Gulf of Maine. But that was kind of a long-winded answer saying it's in the plan, but the dissolved oxygen level that was like the red flag when we first got into this, because more phosphorus means lower dissolved oxygen. They're directly related.
One point, I think, unless I'm mistaken, Ossipee Lake is the 6th largest lake in the state, not the 7th.
Oh, okay.
Point of interest. And there was one other thing I was thinking. I'll get back to it. Somebody else said something.
That chart you had on development, you're saying this 51% is developable now?
Correct. At this time, anything that's in white can't be developed because of an ordinance, because it's protected, or because a lot of the cases is the topography or the geology won't let you develop.
Well, you got about 28% conservation in this town. Doesn't show it on that map.
It doesn't show it on that map, but it's on this map that I brought. So all the conservation areas are here. So in case people want to see that. And I'm actually leaving this with Tim and the Conservation Commission, and, you know, or the town. This is a fancy map, and it's a good map, and it shows you where those areas are. And we have it electronically. I don't know if Ossipee has, you don't have a GIS online. So we can provide the data to you. It's public. It was paid for with state grant money. So, and you can use it in a lot of different ways, and that's, again, I hope you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, you bet. That was interesting.
I'll show you new stuff over here.
Hey? No, in the south end too.
Okay, now that Bob has made it back, this is from Kelly Skian. As Board of Selectmen, I'd like to request to have the following people added as deputy boat tax collectors. Barry Rollins, Luann Rollins, and Abigail Nichols. Because they are all employees of Ward Boat Shop and I work at Ward Boat Shop, I am obviously going to abstain. So if one of you would like to make a motion, please do.
I'll make a motion, we put these people on as deputy tax collectors.
Is there a second?
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
And I abstain.
Rick, a quick clarification, are these voluntary positions?
They are.
Yeah.
It's an agreement that's worked out between the town and in this case a boat dealer. who
Right.
Does
Registrations and collects boat taxes on behalf of the town.
No,
No, not at Ward's. No, they do just boats.
no, the award trophy is done for Fisher Game.
Other new business.
I don't have anything.
Another public input. Anybody have anything they want to add in public input?
Run it, throw it away.
If not, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
One second. Adjourned was, you made the motion.
A little faster.
So, I guess it's okay. Hold up.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.